All right, welcome back, everybody. And I got to say, today this day is flying by. We've had some really good presentations, some good insight from industry experts, and also end users in the departments as well. So, really been a great day so far. So, thank you to everybody for joining us. Wanted to also point in your direction once again, if you haven't pulled it off already. We have the downloadable resources on the right-hand side of your screen, so feel free to pull some of the information that our sponsor, Census Technologies, has provided. And there's a lot of good info there, so please feel free to download that. And I'd also invite you to please follow Beyond Clean on LinkedIn if you haven't already. I know a lot of you out there already are following us, but we'd love to grab some more of you. So it's really great because we post a lot of our events and our educational conferences and webinars on LinkedIn, as well as insight from our entire team. So please follow us. We'd love to have you on there. Today, or this session here, our two speakers are Beth Perry and Jill Sweeney. Beth Perry is the Business Intelligence and Analytics Engineer with Census Technologies. In her role, Beth is responsible for building and supporting trade tracking software programs critical to SPD teams across the US. Beth's passion is to create data and analytics tools to drive operational excellence and ensure patient safety. Jill Sweeney is the clinical educator at Census Technologies. Jill has worked in a variety of roles during her time as a frontline sterile processing professional, including sterile processing technician and SPD coordinator. Jill's continued success in her role stems from her hands-on approach to industry education, which we love. Presentation title is Productivity and Quality, a match made in reprocessing heaven. Improving productivity doesn't have to come at the expense of quality. And that's been a theme today. So, quality is really the top line process here that we're looking at. In fact, productivity and quality are both essential components of any high-performing sterile processing department. How do we effectively monitor productivity while ensuring quality is never compromised? Get ready to discover the data behind productivity and quality monitoring and the tools you can use to invest in the future of your SPD. Please join me in welcoming Beth and Jill to the virtual stage.
All right, welcome to our presentation today. We're going to be talking about productivity and quality, a match made in reprocessing heaven. I'm going to be talking about the clinical perspective to these issues, and so we're going to get started right from there. I'm going to introduce myself first. My name is Jill Sweeney, and I currently work for Census Technologies as a clinical educator. My path into working into the sterile processing world, a lot like a lot of people, was not a direct path by any means. I actually worked for 23 years prior to going into sterile processing, not in healthcare at all, but I worked for the state of Wisconsin Department of Corrections supervising male inmates. So this was a pretty stressful job. I decided I needed a career change and I wanted to travel also. So I ended up going back to school to become a surgical tech. My first job after finishing surgical tech school was working in sterile processing. This wasn't anything I really wanted to do. It was just, well, I'll get my foot in the door and then I'm only going to do this until something better comes along. I did go on to work as a surgical tech. However, I learned quickly I really like sterile processing a lot more than working as a surgical tech. So I ended up going back into the surgical, the SPD world, and I ended up I worked as a tech and a coordinator at a couple different facilities, and then I also worked as a travel sterile processing tech, which is what I had wanted to do all along, was work as a traveler going to different facilities. I did that until March of 2020, when all of a sudden COVID reared its ugly head, and all elective surgical cases were canceled, and most travel contracts were also canceled at that time. Around the same time, I found Census Technologies and was initially hired on with Census as an implementation specialist. I've worked in a few different roles with Census since then, to include my current educator role. I have also attained Gold Crown status with HISPA. I have my CRCST, my CIS, my CER, and my CHL certifications. So, going into our presentation about quality and productivity, a lot that has to do with quality is going to be having to do with compliance. There's a lot of compliance that's involved in sterile processing and in the OR. And, here listed are just some of the agencies that we have to answer to. So, Joint Commission, I put this at the top of the list because this is what people get the most excited about. People in a facility, when Joint Commission's coming, everybody is all on edge that Joint Commission's going to be in the house. So, this is one of the big ones. Joint Commission's been around a long time. They were founded in 1951. So that, for 70 plus years, they've been going to hospitals and making sure that they are, compliant, and that they're, attempting to provide the highest quality care to the patients. So when Joint Commission when a facility is accredited with Joint Commission, that demonstrates their commitment to that continuous improvement in patient care, to, both the staff that work there and to the patients that are seeking care there. So Joint Commission is a big one that we frequently are, when we're looking at compliance, that's what we're looking at. AMI standards is another one, the Association for the Advancement of Medical Instrumentation. They've also been around a long time. 1967 is when that was originally founded. And AMI is that's a big one in sterile processing. When you're looking at standards, looking at things like that, that is for medical device reprocessing. That's a lot of the times the go-to is to that AMI standard. So AORN is also on that list. Operating room nurses, there's a lot of information there, and looking at those operative procedures and things like that. SGNA, that's another one, gastroenterology, those flexible endoscopes, colonoscopies, EGDs, bronchs, anything like that. And in recent years, a lot has been in the news related to the reprocessing of endoscopes and things like that. So SGNA, covers the science and practice of that gastroenterology there. The FDA, a lot of people might think, well, how does the FDA have anything to do with, the Food and Drug Administration? What does that have to do with sterile processing? But, in their mission statement, it says, that they're trying to assure the safety of drugs, biological products, medical devices, and products that emit radiation. So a lot of those things are, pretty, and they have a lot to do with the sterile processing world. So OSHA, this is another one, 1970. So, they've been around for many, many years. And, they're trying to ensure the safety and healthy working conditions for all workers. Every facility I go to, I'm at usually a different facility every week. Every facility I go to, they are short-staffed. So we need to treat our workers in sterile processing and in the OR. We need to treat them right, and OSHA is there to ensure that the safe working conditions are upheld during that. The CDC, that's another one. They used to always kind of, you didn't put too much, or I never put too much thought into the CDC, things like that. However, the CDC in the last 3 years has really been at the forefront with COVID and the global pandemic. You really can't go anywhere without seeing the CDC recommendations, and the CDC says this, and the CDC says this. So, that's a huge thing right now in the news and everywhere, is that CDC. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, that's another one, protecting people in the environment. And then infection control, that might be within your own facility. If you maybe have some surgical site infection issues going on, the infection control is going to work together with the OR, with sterile processing. Everybody's going to work together to, either stop the spread of infections that may be taking place or prevent them altogether. There's other agencies that I don't have listed, or other places for those compliance issues. And that might be department procedures. If you work at different facilities, every facility you go to, there's a new person that comes in And they're like, well, that's not how we did it at my previous place. Well, different departments, different hospitals have different policies and procedures. So those department procedures, those hospital policies, federal mandates, and all of that. Measure quality. There's a lot of different ways to measure quality. And if you look at this slide with the Scrabble board, a lot of times the measurement of quality is you need that one little tile to fall into place, and then you're going to win the game. So maybe it's that 10-point cue that you need that. It's going to go on a triple word score, and then that's going to be your winning move, and that'll be everything that you need to win. Fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of times in the surgical cases, having that one thing, whether it be a elusive peel pack item or a one-of-a-kind tray that you have to have, or anything, in order to quote-unquote win the game, you have to have those items. And a lot of times, it's not just about winning a game; it's a life or death situation that you have those items and you have them when you need them, and that there's not any problems with it. So, some different measurements of quality in sterile processing. Ensuring that the customers have what they need. Your customer in sterile processing might be different than your customer in the OR. Your customer, when you're working in sterile processing, I think a lot of times is going to be the OR staff. So whether that be a circulator, whether it be an OR tech, maybe it's a core tech who's picking cases, anything like that, that might be who your customer is specific to, who you're servicing from sterile processing. So making sure that they have what they need, though, whenever they're in the case, when they're picking cases, things like that. Making sure that things are done right the first time. Making sure that, if a set is going up, that it has the instrumentation in that set that they need. If a peel pack is needed, making sure that like tip protectors are on it, or making sure there's integrators in it, or whatever the process might be that's needed to ensure that that process is done correctly every time. The next thing, instruments processed correctly per the IFU. The IFUs are huge, and that's another thing that goes into making sure that things are done, that your compliance is being done. If you, like cysto cases, a lot of facilities will do like 10 cysto cases in a day, and they'll need, that many cystoscopes in order to do those cases. Well, if somebody is processing cystoscopes and they don't know that, if they put them in a steam sterilizer, or if they put them in even a steroid, but they forget to put the cap on them, well, then they're going to blow that scope. Now the OR goes and opens that cystoscope, and it's now damaged, probably damaged beyond repair at that point. Plus, you've got cases that are actively going on, and now you don't have enough instrumentation for the cases that you have scheduled that day. So all of these things, that's, that instrument that is blown, that's going to cost your department a lot of money, either trying to fix it or just having to buy a new scope altogether. So it's also going to delay your cases, things like that. All of those things, making sure that those things are done correctly are all quality, and making sure that that quality is attained. Timely turnover of instruments and sets, again, getting whatever the OR needs, getting that up to the OR when they need it, and making sure that they have all that instrumentation as they need it. And then, maybe empty shelves at the end of the day. Maybe that's a measurement of quality for your department. Maybe your department only runs, one shift a day, and they only run until 6 o'clock at night. Maybe at the end of the day, your shelves are completely empty, and it's time to go home because our shelves are empty and we've processed everything and we're ready for tomorrow. Some facilities never attain that. Some facilities, their measurement of quality is just that, okay, we've done everything we can for today, and we've got our first cases for tomorrow done and ready to go. And that's quality for them, is that, okay, overnight and tomorrow morning we're going to work on the second and third cases for tomorrow. But right now we've got at least our first cases for tomorrow are all ready to go. So depending, these measurements of quality are going to be specific to your facility. They're going to depend on, the size of your facility, and what goes on at your facility. So it's also going to depend if you're looking at it from a sterile processing point of view or in the OR. So in the OR, cases starting on time, that's usually one of the biggest things that, they look at for quality in the OR. When I was in the OR, every meeting we had talked about, okay, our cases, X number of cases started on time. This was our turnover in between cases. This is, and we always talked about those on time start. So that's a huge measurement of quality in the OR. When they're in the OR, they're opening sets and they're finding sets that don't have any bioburden in them. The sets are all good. They're opening sets and all the sets have indicators in them, or the filters are all good, or the filters are all there. They're not missing filters. So all of those things are going to be measurements of quality in that OR. Sets being correctly assembled and all the proper instrumentation is going to be in that set. And then also that they're not having to IUSS instrumentation. When they have to IUSS items, that may be a thing that, depending on the number of IUSS floats or something, they may use that as a measurement of quality, that we're having to turn over too much instrumentation, we're dropping instrumentation, we're receiving contaminated instrumentation or contaminated sets. And so, this is all different things that when they're measuring quality in the OR, all of those things might come into play related to that. If you'll see between that list, there's quite a bit of crossover that, ensuring that, like on sterile processing, ensuring our customers have what they need. Well, that's making sure that trays have, they don't have bioburden in them. They have indicators in them every time, that they're assembled correctly, needed instrumentation is available. All of those things weigh into making sure the customers have what they need. Making sure things are done right, again, the same thing. So there's a lot of crossover between the two, ensuring that the sterile processing is doing what the OR needs and that OR is having what they need, and, back and forth. Okay, so the importance of quality in sterile processing, and the importance of quality in the OR. So we'll start again with sterile processing. So the quality issues in sterile processing, if these things are presenting themselves, it's going to cause a problem for the OR. So, and again, just like yesterday or the previous slide, when we're talking about, these things are measurements of quality, these things, happening is going to cause problems for the OR. So if there's bioburden in the instruments, if there's missing instruments, if there's incorrect instrumentation in sets, if you have a neuro set and instead of being neuro rongeurs in that set, somebody puts in ortho rongeurs, well, that's going to cause a large problem if they're in a case and maybe, things get all hustle bustle and they don't take the time to look at what kind of rongeur it is, they just grab it and use it. Well, if it's an ortho rongeur and they're using it in a neuro case, it's going to cause a major problem. So things like that, if it's not the incorrect instrumentation, things not sterilized in accordance with the IFU. Again, we talked about that cystoscope and the problems that it'll cause, or a ureteroscope, or any items like that that get sterilized on the wrong cycles, anything else like that, that'll cause problems for the OR. Filters installed incorrectly or missing filters, missing indicators, and sets not ready in a timely fashion. So all of those things, we kind of previously addressed all of those. So, however, you would think, okay, well, a lot of, all these quality issues that occur in the OR, that, this all goes directly back to the SPD. And a lot of times there's a lot of finger pointing that goes, well, this is SPD's fault or whatever. Well, a lot of it does go back to SPD, that these things need to be done properly. However, a lot of the issues that may occur in SPD, there's things that the OR can do to make sure that these things don't transpire, anywhere during that perioperative loop. So going to the quality issues in the OR that will directly affect SPD, the number one thing that needs to be done every single time on every single case is that point of use treatment. That's the biggest thing that needs to be done. If the OR completes a case, they clamp shut all their clamps, they don't spray anything down, they don't remove that excess gross debris, they don't remove cement off of their instrumentation, things like that, that's going to create huge problems in SPD. When they get that instrumentation, maybe they're not going to get it for a little while because it takes a while for it to get pushed down to the dirty elevator, and then maybe they don't get to it because they've got 4 or 5 other carts in front of it. All that stuff is dried on. and now they get this case cart that's going to have all this, this gross debris, all these other problems, and now they're going to spend a significant amount of time trying to get this information clean and properly processed. A lot of times they'll think that they did a good job. They'll send it through the wash. Maybe they've set that, they've soaked it and scrubbed it and brushed it and done everything that they can. They've put it in the ultrasonic. They send it through the wash, and it gets to the assembly side, the prep and pack, and it still isn't actually clean. A lot of facilities now are using boroscopes, and it's amazing, the amount of time you can spend. Maybe you have some suctions, brushing your suctions, soaking your suctions, ultrasonic, sending it through the wash, and then you get it to the clean side and use that boroscope, and it still is not clean in that suction. So a lot of these issues are, really goes back to that point of use cleaning, making sure suctions are clean, making sure the instrumentation is all cleaned at that point of use. Instruments not returned, or instruments being thrown out, or instruments ending up in the wrong location during a case. So a lot of times towel clips, for example, get used to hold up drapes. And then at the end of the case, they get wrapped right up in those drapes and get thrown in the garbage. So things like that set comes back down, and now the set is incomplete because it's missing your instrumentation. Or maybe you have some pickups that end up getting mixed up in something and get thrown out. Or maybe you have a big neuro case or a big ortho case that had 4 or 5 sets involved in it, and you've got all the instrumentation from all the sets all mixed together. And now the person in decon doesn't know what instrumentation goes with what set. And so they do the best job they can, send it over to assembly. And now in assembly, they've got a bunch of, trays that, one tray has too much stuff and another tray is missing a bunch of stuff. And well, if it's a small facility, that's not a big deal. But if it's one of these facilities that always has hundreds of trays that are down, it is a big deal then, because, here, this orthos, these 3 ortho sets are just going to go on this shelf with 100 other ortho sets, and now we don't know where any of this, the stuff that belongs in each set, where it actually is. So sets that might get returned to the wrong location. This is another problem. A lot of people, meaning well, they'll be up in the OR and they'll be like, well, we didn't use this case we didn't use this set during this case, so I'm going to return it back to its proper location so that, it's available the next time we need to use it. And they'll go and they'll take it back, and they'll think that they put it back in its rightful location. Well, then maybe a few days later, the OR will call and say, hey, we're looking for this tray, but we can't find it. And so then if they have a tracking system, they might, the SPD might look on their tracking system and say, well, the last scan was the previous scan before that was rack 1, shelf 1, which is where this tray lives. And they're like, yeah, we looked, it's not there. Well, now you're going to have to go on a treasure hunt to go and try to track down this tray, because, somebody trying to help put it back in the wrong location. So, making sure that you have your process in place for after a case, that if you have trays that need to be put away, that we're going to, have a return cart. Everybody puts their things on the return cart. And then at the end of each shift, maybe, one person will go and actually, they have, good knowledge of where everything lives. They'll put everything back where it actually belongs. And then and maybe they actually use their tracking system too. So they scan it back to the shelf. So they know, okay, it's been returned. It's been noted in our tracking system where it belongs, and now we're good to go, so we don't have to worry about it in the future not being able to track down the inventory. So another problem that frequently occurs that causes SPD many headaches is inadequate case notice. So maybe a lot of times it's a loaner case, but not always. Sometimes it's an actual facility case, but a lot of times it's a loaner case. And your vendor rep shows up and he's got, 10 or 20 trays or 40 trays or whatever. He's got trays, and he says, well, these are for a case with Dr. Jones, and it's in 2 hours. That's not going to be a problem, is it? Well, that is a problem, because just to get it through decontam, it's probably going to take you an hour to get it out of the washer. And then, from there, it's going to take you, depending on the number of trays, probably going to take you another hour to get everything, look through everything, go through everything, take all the indicators from the previous hospital back out, go through all of that, and then to wrap everything and then to sterilize everything will be at least another hour. So, having that not adequate notice to get things done in a timely fashion, that'll cause a problem, every time for sterile processing. And then a lot of times, that creates, again, going back to finger pointing of, well, who's at fault up in the OR? Maybe that rep is like, well, I don't know, I left the trays with sterile processing. And then, sterile processing is like, well, we didn't have time to do them properly. So a lot of times, that, again, that causes quality issues going back and forth between staff in the OR, staff and sterile processing. So, and then also not enough time between cases. That kind of goes to inadequate case notice. Maybe you, maybe you have, 5 sets of eye instrumentation and you're going to do 5 cataract surgeries, but one thing ends up getting contaminated. And so now you've got 5 cases scheduled. You only have 4 things. The cataract surgeries only take, 20 minutes a piece, and you don't have time to reprocess them in between. So not leaving enough time on the schedule for your inventory that you currently have. Also kind of adding on to that, not having enough inventory for, as that, we're going to do X number of cases every day, you have to have adequate inventory to cover that. One facility that I worked at, we had a surgeon and he had 2 first assists, and between him and his 2 first assists, they could do like 8 total hips in a day. And he would, in an hour and a half, he could do his portion of that total hip. And then he had a first assist in each room. And so he would just bounce back and forth and they would just do total hips all day. Well, when you only have 5 total hip sets in your inventory, that's not enough total hip sets to keep up with, what that surgeon is doing. So, so those are the 2, the examples of, having enough time between cases to make sure sterile processing can keep up with what they're trying to do. So this kind of leads into quantity. So a lot of times, everybody likes to say, well, quality is more important. Making sure everything is done properly is more important. And, that's the talking line is it definitely is quality over quantity is what when we're looking at things in sterile processing. But the nature of the beast is that in the perioperative environment, a lot of times quantity really becomes an important factor because you have the cases that need to be done. If there's 10 patients that need to have cystos done, they need to be done. And it doesn't matter how many cystoscopes you have or how many scopes you've blown up in your by not putting your caps on or anything like that. The items need to get done and the quantity has to, it comes into play. A lot of facilities are short staffed. And so again, where, maybe 10 years ago and maybe the staffing was better then, maybe then they were like, okay, if you could do 20 trays a day, that would be great. But now, a lot of facilities are like, we need you to be doing 50 trays a day in assembly, or we need you to be doing 60 trays or whatever quantitative number they're putting on their assembly staff to ensure that things are getting done and to try and, beat those quantity needs. So this kind of brings us to, what we're talking about is, quality or quantity. Does it have to be either or? We're thinking that you have to have both quality and quantity in order to get the productivity that you need, not be doing duplicate work, and to be meeting the demands of your perioperative environment. So going into ways to increase your productivity without decreasing your quality, you have to have the right tools available to make the job easier, staff more productive, and the products higher quality. So one of the best ways to do this, you have to have up-to-date preference cards and accurate count sheets. A lot of times the count sheets won't be correct. It'll have, things you don't need. It'll have excess instruments. You have these sets that have like 150 instruments in it, and only like 15 of the instruments ever get used in the set. do we really need to process these great big huge sets? Do we need to be assembling these great big sets when these things aren't actually being needed, or aren't being used? On the other hand, maybe there's something that, it does need to be used on every case, but, it's not included in the set. One facility that I worked with, the surgeon, he wanted a Surratt needle holder in every single case, no matter what the case was. He wanted a Surratt needle holder. And he would get upset at the end of every case because he wouldn't have a Surratt needle holder. Well, in looking at his preference cards, not any of his preference cards indicated he wanted a Surratt needle holder. And in turn, none of the sets had Surratt needle holders in it, nor did we have a very large selection of them in our field pack inventory. So, things like that, making sure that the preference cards are up to date and your count sheets are up to date. That's one of the best ways to, make sure that staff have the proper recipes when they're making those, when they're building those sets and everything, they have what they need to do that. The next thing is a thorough knowledge of the instrumentation that they're working with. Again, short-staffed. A lot of facilities that I visit, they're hiring people just off the streets. They have no sterile processing background. They have no knowledge of surgical instrumentation. And so they're, just trying to do the best job that they can, but they just don't have the knowledge. So imparting the knowledge in them. There's, different ways that you can do that. You can, maybe have your different vendors that come in and do in-service on how to process different instrumentation. So like Da Vinci, for example, is a very complex processing of their Da Vinci arms. So maybe, having that Da Vinci rep come in, show, the ports that you use to flush them, how they, where they're lubricated, all of that information, how they're soaked, how they're hooked up to the ultrasonic, all of that information, goes through to making those techs more knowledgeable about how the instrumentation should be, cleaned and disinfected and assembled and anything like that. Another thing is, if, things need to be how they, going on to the next bullet point about specific instructions, having those instructions available. If, back in decontam, if a lap instrument set comes in, well, you don't just spray it off and throw it in the washer, because all of those instruments need to be disassembled. They need to be taken apart. Lumens need to be flushed. All of those things need to be done to ensure that things are being done properly and in accordance with the IFUs. Again, having those instructions available, at the various stops along the way, having them available in decontam and back in assembly and in sterilization to ensure that all of those steps are being taken and being done properly. That's a good way to ensure staff are as knowledgeable as possible. Also, proper staff orientation and training for SPD and or staff. A lot of times, when staff initially come on, maybe they do 30 days of orientation or whatever they do for orientation, and then they're just kind of thrown to the wolves and hope for the best. Doing that proper staff orientation with, the staff and SPD, maybe they start out and maybe they're like, okay, you're new, you don't know anything about sterile processing, so we're going to have you start out in assembly, and you are only going to assemble minor trays at this time. So once you know all the instrumentation in the minor trays, we're going to move you on to major trays. Once you know all the major tray instrumentation, we're going to move you on to ortho trays, and so on and so forth. And so they gradually kind of get a feel of having that thorough instrumentation knowledge, and they can kind of work their way through the different processes doing that. Having like a shadowing system also is a great idea for sterile processing and the OR. So if a sterile processing tech can go and sit in on a couple surgical procedures, watch the room being set up, watch the actual procedure, and then watch when they tear down the room and they're doing their pre-treatment, hopefully, they can see all that information, and then they can it'll register, oh, well, this is why it's important for me to make sure I have integrators in my trays every single time, or this is why it's important for me to make sure I have my instruments strung correctly, or whatever the thing may be. Also from the OR's perspective, if an OR tech can come down and spend a day back in decontam working back there, they can, learn the importance of making sure everything's pre-treated. Or if they can work over in assembly, they can make sure, look and make, see different challenges that are presented to SPD that maybe they don't take into consideration when they're up in the OR doing their OR things. So, and then also, so moving on, the easy access to the IFUs. A lot of facilities are using one source to, gain access to those IFUs. If Joint Commission comes on site and they are going to be auditing your facility, that's usually one of their first questions is, well, how do you know how to sterilize this item? So that's, the facilities that I worked at as a tech, that was always my go-to answer was, well, I know because I use one source, or I know because of the IFUs, and this is where I can find the IFUs or whatever. So also any guidelines and standards, we talked about at the very beginning, the AMI standards, the AORN, the any of those governing bodies that may dictate what those standards are. So being able to know either what those standards are or know who to go to that can direct you to the correct place to find those standards. So also another and a super important part of any effective quality program is a good quality feedback program for quality events, reporting quality events. And if you have that two-way communication between the OR and between SPD, having that where if a tray comes up and something's, deficient with that tray, that the OR can report that information back, and vice versa. If a tray comes into decontam and there's a blade on a knife handle, the sterile processing can notate that. You can, using that that quality event program, then you can follow any trends that are happening. If maybe Joint Commission comes on site, and Joint Commission at one facility I was at, they were like, every tray that comes down from the OR to SPD should have be sprayed down, and then it should have a wet towel, and then it should have the dirty instruments should be separated from the clean instruments or something like that. And so then using we had it was on paper at that time, but it was basically, when we just had a piece of paper that we tracked that on, that every tray that came down from the OR had met those, things that Joint Commission had identified during your visit. And then we just kept track of that way. And then, every week when they had their meetings between the departments, they would report on that, and they would be like, okay, last week you had 42 trays that came down without wet towels. This week you only had 12. So great job. We're really gaining ground on this. Let's keep it up, whatever. So using that quality feedback program and having that effective communication is imperative, I think, for any facility for the that's wanting to attain both the quality and the quantity. So looking here, the little diagram there that has, the quality assurance, the standards, the best practices, quality control, and you see that all converges in the middle, and when, everything gets done properly. So then you've got your quality and your quantity equaling your productivity. So hopefully as your quality goes up, your quantity also will improve, and then your productivity will be met, your productivity goals. So what that would look like, your cases are all going to go on time. Your instrumentation is going to be processed according to their IFU. You're not going to have damaged instrumentation. You're not going to have work that needs to be done twice, because, you're not going to have trays that get up and they end up having bioburden in it, and then they have to be reprocessed or anything like that. Staff aren't going to have to waste time looking for a lost item. It'll cut down on calls from your OR. Your OR won't be calling, hey, we can't find this because it's not where it belongs. They can go and look where it belongs, or maybe they can just look in the tracking system and see, okay, this is where it's at. Your IUSS loads will be kept to a minimum, so you won't have to, be turning items over, maybe dropped items, or maybe things that were missing out of a tray, and you have to quickly try and scramble and get those done. Your records, you'll be able to verify, doing, your quality audits and, quality control. making sure that your records are complete and accurate all the time. And whether that's done on a, by shift, you're making sure that everything is done thoroughly, or maybe by the day or by the week, or maybe you have different layers of people looking into that maybe a lead tech is going to do it for the shift, and maybe a supervisor will do it, for the day, or you have a specific quality control person or a QA person. And then if you know that all those records are complete and accurate at the end of each day, the end of each week, then you know that you're survey ready all the time. There's no scrambling that, Joint Commission's coming in 2 weeks and I have to go and review 6 months or a year's worth of records to make sure that we have everything, in place and everything is done correctly. You know that it's done correctly because you've been reviewing it all along, making sure that everything's good to go. So to summarize, you don't need to sacrifice quality to improve your quantity and your productivity. By having the higher standards of quality, that is automatically going to lead you into the improved productivity. And the more time that we invest into our people, the better product I think that we're going to get into returns. So that is all I have for my presentation. I'm going to pass it off to Beth, and she is going to go into her data information.
Thanks a lot, Jill. Yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing what I've learned about the relationship between productivity and quality from a data perspective. But first, I thought I would share a little bit about me so you could know, who I am and why I'm here talking with you today. So my name is Beth Perry. I am a business intelligence and analytics engineer with Census Technologies. I've been working with data for quite a while now. I have more than 15 years of experience, most of that building reports and helping to design software systems. And for the last 10 years that I spent with Census, I've really been focused a lot on the sterile processing space and the data surrounding the workflow in sterile processing. So my main responsibility in my current role is I'm helping to build a data and analytics platform. Our goal for that platform is really to help our hospitals to develop and maintain a culture of excellence. And I mention that because a lot of the data that I'm going to be sharing with you through this presentation and the learnings that I'm sharing are a direct result of my work on this project. So let me tell you a little bit more about it. When we decided we wanted to build a data and analytics platform, we wanted to make sure that whatever we built was going to benefit as many hospitals as possible. So we really didn't want to try and build that in a vacuum. And instead, what we did is we've actually partnered with more than 20 hospitals to be a part of our pilot program in developing this platform. So these hospitals range in size and type. We have small community hospitals. We have some that are large university, level 1 trauma center type hospitals, some that are independent, some part of IDNs, and you get the idea. We're trying to work with as broad a customer base as we possibly can to get all those perspectives put into our platform. And we meet weekly with sterile processing leaders within each of our hospital systems. Often that's going to mean it's a sterile processing manager or director, but we do also occasionally meet with people in other roles who might be education coordinators, or they might be in charge of putting together QA programs within the hospital, infection control, and even sometimes we'll meet with, VPs and the senior leadership within our hospital systems. So as we started to kick off this project, which we did, about a year ago, the very first topic that we decided to tackle was productivity. And, a lot of the times within a hospital, surgeries provide most of the revenue for our hospitals. And with COVID, as Jill mentioned, a lot of times surgeries had to be stopped. Elective procedures weren't allowed to go forward in a lot of states for a period of time. And so hospitals, lost a lot of the revenue that they were counting on. And so now that we're moving, out of the pandemic, hospitals are really looking to ramp up those surgeries, to ramp up that revenue, to even, to meet the levels they were at before and then to even exceed them. And meanwhile, also as Jill shared, staffing has had a lot of other changes during the pandemic, and it's been very difficult for our sterile processing teams to remain fully staffed. So, our leaders that we're working with, they feel pressure from the operating room to really do as many surgeries as possible and turn as many trays as possible. But they're trying to do that workload with fewer staff than they've ever had to do it before. So, we tackled productivity as a way to show our leaders, the opportunities that they have within their departments to really improve that productivity and meet the OR's needs, even while they're trying to do it, maybe with a reduced staff. And so when we were meeting with our hospitals, they were really excited at the data that we were starting to show them. But what we noticed as we met with them is that there was a consistent concern that would come up over and over again. I mean, they'd say, it's great that you're helping us to do more, but what about quality? How is this going to affect the quality of the work that I'm delivering to the operating room? So, we finished productivity last fall, and then we immediately kicked off our next project to work on a quality module so that we could really dig into this and try and help our hospitals on the quality side as well. And I give you all this background to let you know that, what this means is that I've really spent the last year just pretty much completely immersed in productivity and quality data from sterile processing departments. So when we were meeting with our leaders and they were asking us, what about quality? What they were really concerned about is that, if they push their technicians to go faster so that they can get more work done, what that's going to mean is that technicians are going to rush. And technicians who are rushing would likely make more mistakes. And then if mistakes happen, that could really be a threat to patient safety. It could really compromise patient safety. And none of us wanted that. So we wanted to, kind of make sure that we weren't pushing departments to do things that were going to have adverse reactions. But what we took away from those conversations was really this perception that productivity and quality were opposing goals. If I focus on improving my productivity, I necessarily have to sacrifice quality. If I focus on improving my quality, then I have to tell people to slow down, and then we won't get as much done. So as we started to develop the quality module, what we expected to see is a data pattern like the one that you should be seeing on your screen. So this is a scatter plot, and I'll kind of talk you through it. Right here on the bottom, we have throughput, which is productivity. And so as we move from left to right, each dot is a technician and they're completing more trays. And then as we look on the left-hand side, this is error rate, which is quality. And so we see, as technicians complete more trays, they're also making more errors. And so we have this dashed line that kind of goes up to the top right. And what this is saying is that as technicians rush to complete more trays, they're going to make more errors. And this is the pattern that we should see if productivity and quality are really opposing goals. But as we got into the data and we actually started plotting it, what I'm showing you here on the screen is data from one of our partner hospitals. That wasn't the pattern that we saw. We actually see the opposite pattern. On the pattern I expected to see, the dashed line was going up to the top right. But here you can see the dashed line is actually going downwards to the bottom right. And what this is saying is that the technicians that were completing the most number of trays every day were the same technicians who were making the fewest errors per tray. And on one hand, this is a great result because it means that productivity and quality are not opposing goals. You can actually improve both of them at the same time. But it's also a bit of a counterintuitive result because, all those conversations that we had with SPD managers and directors, it makes sense what they're saying, where they say, if my technicians rush, they're going to make more mistakes. And so we wanted to really, dig in a little bit more and understand why the results that we were getting were so different from the results that seemed logical. And so we needed to dig in deeper and see if there's, maybe another factor at play here that's actually influencing both productivity and quality. So one explanation that seemed plausible was that technicians who are more proficient, people who are really good at their job, are probably going to be able to do more trays per day, so they'll have a higher productivity, and they're also probably likely to make fewer errors on those, so they would have better quality. And so in this hypothesis that we have, proficiency is really the driving factor behind both productivity and quality. But that raised another question for us, and that's, how should we measure technician proficiency? Because there are a few approaches that we could take to try and measure that. For example, we could look at the length of the technician's service time, either at their current facility or, if they had worked in sterile processing for a long time, over the length of their career. It could be true that people who have worked a longer period of time would be better at their job. Another thing that we could try to do to measure proficiency is maybe we look at the number and types of competencies that technicians have earned over their career, and we try and relate that to the number of errors that they make. But you could probably think of some other ways to measure proficiency as well. The way that we decided to measure proficiency, looking at the data that we had, is a measure that we call repertoire size. So let me explain how that works. Repertoire size may sound fancy, but really it's a pretty simple concept. It's simply a count of the number of different types of things that a technician is able to assemble. So, a major set is one example of a type of tray. A minor set is another example of a type of tray. You could assemble, 10 major sets, 5 minor sets. It might be 15 trays, but it's still only 2 different types of trays. So that's kind of what we mean by repertoire size. We know from working with our hospitals that, when new technicians start, and Jill touched on this as well, they usually start on a limited set of trays. They work a lot on general instrumentation. They don't touch a lot of the more complex instrumentation because they just don't have the knowledge and skills yet to be able to correctly assemble those sets. And so what we see with new technicians is that the number of different types of things they work with is relatively small. And so, from this definition, they have a relatively small repertoire size. However, as technicians gain experience and they grow in their career, that's when we start to see that they branch out. So they still know how to assemble the general sets that they started working on, but maybe now they've learned how to handle some of the more complex instrumentation. Maybe they've learned how to do open heart sets. They've worked with some of the neuro sets. They've worked with robotic arms and maybe some of the eye instruments. And so, now that they've added these additional service lines into their skill set, their repertoire size has really expanded from the limited set that they had. So that's a quick explanation of what we mean by repertoire size. And as we've defined it here, what we would say is that the higher the repertoire size is, the more proficient that technician is. So greater repertoire, greater proficiency. Now that you've had a little introduction to this measure and kind of understand how it works, let's see how it compares with productivity and quality. All right, so I'm going to walk you through this slide, but here we can see that, yes, indeed, when we take our new measure for proficiency, repertoire size, and we compare that to both productivity and quality, it lines up with our hypothesis. More proficient technicians are able to complete more trays per day, and they're able to make fewer errors. So let me walk you through these 2 scatter plots. Up on the top, we have proficiency against productivity. So we have on the bottom of that, we have items per tech per day, which is productivity. And as we move from left to right, technicians are completing more trays per day. And then on the left-hand side, we have that proficiency measure, repertoire size. So as we go from bottom to top, you're getting more proficient technicians. So looking at the dots, if we start in the bottom left, you have technicians who have a relatively low throughput, so low productivity, and they also have a low repertoire size. So that's less proficient technicians are less productive. And then as we follow the dotted line up to the top right, you have technicians that have a lot of throughput and they also have large repertoire sizes. So more proficient technicians get more work done. And then here on the bottom, we have quality on the left, which is your error rate, and you have your repertoire size on the bottom for your proficiency. And so what we're seeing as we follow this dotted line from the left-hand side, we have technicians with a low repertoire size, because it's closer to the left-hand side. And we see that that's actually on the higher side of the error rates that are there. So less proficient, higher error rate. And then following the dashed line down to the bottom right, we have technicians who are highly proficient and they have the lowest error rates. So this is awesome news because technician repertoire size is something that we call an actionable metric. And what I mean by actionable is that it's something that SPD managers and directors and education coordinators can actually influence. If we were looking at a measure instead, if we were looking at, service time, for example, service time is not an actionable metric because it might be true that technicians who have spent more time in their position are more proficient and do better work. However, if you have a new technician and you're using this metric of service time, you can't really influence time. So all you could really do is wait a certain number of weeks or months before you deem that new technician proficient because they've now been there long enough. So that's not something that you can influence. But repertoire size is something that you can actually, intentionally spend time proactively working on to improve productivity and quality in your organization. Now, as I say that, I do want to offer one word of caution. Knowing that repertoire size is correlated with both productivity and quality is really useful, but it is not magic. So here's what I don't want to have happen. I don't want anyone to walk away from this presentation thinking, okay, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to get everybody on my staff to assemble every single possible different type of trade that I have in my department. They're going to get huge repertoire size scores, and then I'm going to have peak productivity and a 0% error rate in my department. That would be really unlikely to happen. That's not the way that metrics work. So repertoire size as a metric really has value only when it is a valid representation of a technician's true proficiency. So gaming the system to make sure that people have really big repertoire sizes isn't what's going to help you achieve greatness. Increasing repertoire size in a meaningful way would look more like building training programs designed to help to expand new technicians' range more quickly. Maybe looking at your service lines to see ones where maybe you only have a few technicians who are really, really proficient in those service lines, and then prioritizing those for your next upcoming trainings so that you can get more technicians involved with those service lines. Or, we hear this a lot from hospitals where they have certain technicians who kind of cherry pick what they want to assemble. And so they're really only working with a few things because those are the things they feel most comfortable with. And if you know of some of those technicians, you can, keep your eye on them and then just kind of encourage them to branch out from there. Then you can specifically work on growing that technician and improving their repertoire size. So now we kind of understand, how the metric works and what some meaningful ways might be to try it and influence it. We also wanted to learn a little bit more from our partner hospitals, kind of like, what they saw as the why and the how, this repertoire size metric really helped to improve both productivity and quality. So we discussed the connection with them, and they were able to come up with some reasons why, just having this broad exposure to instrumentation, which is the value of having a large repertoire size, why that would actually make technicians more productive and also more attentive to quality. And now I'm excited to share those with you. So first off, being exposed to a lot of different instruments and really learning how to be a very highly proficient technician. The first benefit of that is just simply, you can assemble pretty much any type of tray. Where you have trays that are waiting for assembly, a highly proficient technician can go up there and whatever is most needed, they can just grab it and they can do that assembly right away. For someone who's less proficient and isn't able to do just anything, they have to spend extra time kind of looking to see, what's here that I can actually work on. And so there's time that's kind of wasted where they're looking for work to be done, as opposed to, your very proficient technician who just walks up there and they're actually spending, as much time as possible during the day being productive, assembling sets, so they have higher productivity. Next, although there are a wide variety of surgical instruments, we also know that there are similarities between them. And the benefit of being able to work on a lot of different types of instruments is that, a technician is going to start to see those similarities and patterns. And as they do that, they're really going to, start to understand, really how the instruments are meant to function. So when you know how something is supposed to work, then you are really going to know how to properly test it. And you're going to be able to much more easily identify instruments that are deficient in some way. Maybe they're broken and maybe they're just damaged, but you're going to be able to pull those instruments out and keep them from going up to the OR to create those quality events in the first place. And then also you'll understand, knowing how instruments work and how best to protect them and things like that, you'll be able to assemble the tray in such a way that the chances of it arriving in the OR in a condition where it can't be used are greatly reduced. And then similarly, we talked with our hospitals and they raised this as another possible benefit. When you have someone who works on a lot of different types of instruments, you start to kind of learn where bioburden can hide in those, and you get a lot of different exposure to different places that it could be. So as opposed to, a specialist who is only working on certain types of instrumentation and they do the same types of thing, maybe just a single, service line, that's what they know. That's what they're trained on. They're trained to look for bioburden in specific places, but that is all they see. Somebody who instead is more of a generalist, who works with a lot of different instruments, someone assembling, a similar set to one of those specialists might say, well, I know that you're trained to look in these places for bioburden, but I've seen an instrument that looks a lot like this one, and it had bioburden in this other spot. And so they might actually recognize additional places where bioburden could get into, just because they have that additional exposure and maybe have seen something on a different instrument. So these are some of the ways that the practical explanations, I guess, for just how repertoire size, in addition to being a good metric to measure proficiency, like how it actually works, that seeing a lot of different things can make you a better technician. And then I'm going to wrap up here, and you'll notice that these are the same points that Jill had at the end of her presentation, but I think that they are worth repeating, because what that means is that whether you're looking at productivity and quality from a clinical perspective, as Jill shared with us, or if you're looking at it from a data perspective, like I am, we really came to the same conclusions. Productivity and quality are both achievable goals. You don't have to sacrifice one to improve the other. But really the key piece that's going to help you achieve those goals is the people that you have on your team. So whatever investments that you can make in helping them to become better and more proficient technicians, those are the sorts of things that are really going to help you to build the operational excellence that your department is striving for. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our presentation today. We really appreciate being able to share these things with you, and we hope that you are able to put them to good use within your department. Thank you.
All right, Beth and Jill, thank you so much. And we ran over a little bit on time, so we're going to have to sign off here pretty quickly because we got another session coming up in just over 5 minutes. So any questions that you have for Jill or Beth, you can feel free to send them over to them via email or through their LinkedIn. That's highlighted once again on the right-hand side of the page. Once again, at the end of the conference today, you will be directed, you will receive your CE certificate. So stick with us. We've got a couple more sessions to go. Really got 2 more really good sessions I'd like to point out. So stick with us. I'll see you in about 6 minutes. All right, thanks. Bye.